Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking training, or not training, it's a membership called Teach the Geek to Speak Society. And you can find out about that at teachthegeek.com. And you can also get my tips, my public speaking tips for STEM professionals. You can find out about that at teachthegeek.com/tips. Today, my guest is Jim Morris. He is the founder of the Product Discovery Group, serving as a mentor and coach to product teams to assist them with idea development, user testing, user research, and developing rapid prototypes. He even developed a custom curriculum and training program to further this effort. I'm interested to learn more about his start in computer science, the companies he's founded, and the way that public speaking has benefited his career. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Jim.
Awesome. Thanks, Neil.
So from a bit of research I did on you, I saw that you got a degree in computer science. What motivated that degree?
It was a bit of a surprise, actually. I'd taken a class in high school in computer science and I dropped it. And I was like, oh, this is not for me. And got to college and struggled in the core subjects. And I took a computer science course. And by the time I was done with it, I'd pulled my first all-nighter and I was kind of hooked for life, and kind of switched to being a computer science major. And I think it was sort of the ability to create something, and really to some degree, you're kind of creating it from nothing because it's just, words on a screen. And I wasn't as proficient in electrical or mechanical introductory classes. So it was sort of like I ended up being okay at it and I really liked it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember I had to take a not computer science. It was a computer programming course in my first semester, and it went terribly. That was the worst course I think I've ever taken in my life. It turns out that I don't have the patience to write code and wait for it to get right. Typically, when you try to compile it, then there's some sort of bug in there. So you gotta go look for it and find out what's wrong. Like, I didn't have the patience for that, Jim. And so I realized that computer science, computer engineering was just software engineering, any of that was just not in my future. So then, so
I mean, we slept under the desk at the computer lab back when you had to go to the computer lab, and it's a lot of long hours, and I don't know why that didn't turn me off.
Yeah, the same going to the computer lab, and I didn't want to go. It made it very clear that at least that type of engineering wasn't going to be in my future. I better pick something else. So, I noticed that you've worked at companies, you've also founded companies. What skills did you learn as an employee that helped you in founding your companies?
I got really lucky early on to be given a lot of responsibility as a young person. And I try not to forget that when I encounter young people who don't know much. Because there's a large capacity to learn in people. And so I think I was really given a lot of opportunity. I was really hungry for it. And so that's why I started my career joining in small companies. And that's where I had that opportunity. So I kind of encourage young people to join small companies because they get to try a lot of different roles. And then you can maybe specialize once you kind of figure that out. But if you spend 3 or 4 years in a specific role, you may kind of wonder, like, well, what else could I have done?
Yeah, I see what you're saying there, Jim. Actually, when I think about even the jobs that I've had, they've all been at small companies too. I've never worked at a large company. So you're right. When you're at those smaller companies, you kind of get to try a bunch of different things, see what you like, see what you don't like. I get the sense that if you're at one of those bigger companies, you get put in this role and you have to stay there and then have to really advocate for yourself to move somewhere else. And that might not happen. They'll say, oh, just continue doing, building this widget or designing this widget. And you just kind of get stuck there, and then you get discouraged and disgruntled, and then you quit. And then, so rinse and repeat, especially if you go to another large company, then they stick you somewhere.
Well, I do know happy people at large companies. I think they do provide like stability on like the funding side, and they do have longer term, sight. But yeah, for me, I enjoy the eclectic aspect of smaller companies, of doing more stuff. And yeah, it would be hard to be in a large company and do a more specific thing for a very long period of time.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe that's the main reason a whole lot of people, even now, you hear about this whole great resignation. Maybe that's what's spurring it. It's just people are just tired, all this time spending at home, and you just sit in front of your computer or doing your work, the same work you've been doing for however many years on end. And it's just like, man, there's got to be more to work than this damn widget. I'm gonna find something else to do with myself. I quit. So Jim, I mentioned the product discovery group. What type of clients do you work with, and what type of, I guess, what work do you provide for them?
Yeah, I work with startups and corporations, so kind of like smaller side and bigger side, and really anybody who's using software to build something, whether it's a website, an app, a set of reports or analysis, or even an internal platform. I help them with idea development. So basically, before you engineer it, so even though I come from the software engineering side, a lot of what I work with my teams on is before you give it to the engineers, how do we develop this idea? We show it to customers. We kind of make fake solutions to get really good feedback. And it's not to say engineers are not involved. Actually, you want an engineer in this process. They remind folks like, hey, these big companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, half of the Apple founding team were just engineers, and we use these products every day, and they created them. And so we need to make sure that our innovation process, our idea development, has engineers in it. But yeah, so that's what I do, work with teams or product leaders or product managers, usually in an embedded fashion. So I spend a good amount of time with them each week, facilitating different kinds of sessions to address different kinds of problems. And really the goal for them is to address the risk in their product. You can certainly build it and see how it goes, but that's going to take a lot of time and potentially money. And what could you learn sooner?
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's an excellent point. I think a lot of times people just think, you build it and they will come. If we think it's a good idea, other people think it's a great idea too. Not necessarily. I mean, people might think it's a great idea, but they may not want to pay for it, or maybe they don't think it's a great idea at all, and they're not going to pay for it. So you really got to try to figure that kind of stuff out beforehand before you spend the time and effort and money to put something together. So yeah, you're absolutely right. People definitely need people, or companies definitely need people like you, especially because you're, I guess, a third party coming in and saying, maybe we should, take a step back. I know you're really attached to this idea and then wanting to put it out there, but let's take a step back and see if this is something that the market even wants and is willing to pay for. So that's smart. So Jim, when it comes to the, I really enjoy when it comes to this podcast and YouTube channel, talking to people like yourself, people that, have these engineering or science backgrounds, but they also see the benefit of just presenting in front of people. I know I certainly had issues with that when I first started working as an engineer. I had to give presentations, wasn't very good at it, but I got a lot better at it because I didn't want to look foolish in front of all these people having to give these presentations. So when it comes to presenting in front of people, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Short answer is no. I used to have the huge heart pumping before I would get on, just in front of the company to relate the latest, news for the engineering department. One of the things I did, I would keep a little Post-it note with all of my bullet points for what I was going to talk about, sort of before phones, I suppose. And I would just refer to it, and people would wonder, how could you talk 25 minutes with just a Post-it note? But it did allow me to just take a subject and talk about it and not have to necessarily worry about what I was going to talk about next, because if I got lost, I would just look down to my mini agenda. So that was one thing, because you do just sort of forget about stuff when you're up on stage. And then I started asking questions of the group. So I remember one of my first speaking appearances, I asked everybody, I spent a lot of time with product reviews. How many of you sort reviews to view the negative ones first? And it was a really interesting response. And then I started asking that question every time I spoke. As it turns out, about 20% of everybody you know will sort the reviews to negative and read the negative reviews first. And it was a very consistent number. And then that actually became something I could talk about in future talks. Even though for me, it was just a matter of, breaking the ice with the group. I don't know, there's just two things I remember. And it slowly got more comfortable. I still get a little bit nervous because in product management of, there's a lot less, there are a lot fewer boundaries, and it's a lot less well known. Engineering is much more well known, even software engineering. I mean, we used to make a lot of stuff up, but now with all the various forms of Agile, there's lots of processes, there's lots of tools, and product management is a developing field. And so, we're always trying to bring more knowledge and happiness to all the people trying to figure out how to develop ideas. So, yeah.
It's interesting how you say that 20% of people look at negative reviews first. I must be part of those 20%, at least when it comes to book reviews. So I'll go on Amazon, and when people talk about, this is the best business book ever, and this is I highly recommend it, I'll go to their page and I'll go straight to the 1 and 2 star reviews, because I'm curious to see what people don't like about the book. And what the biggest complaint or critique of books is these days is that they're unnecessarily long. And it's so true. It's why I started reading books on tape or Audible. I stopped reading because the book, I'll look at the length of the page, like, oh my God, this thing's 300 pages. Do I really want to read all this? I was like, let me just get the Audible and just let somebody else just tell me what this book is about, But yeah, man, actually, I did some research into that.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
I did some research into it, actually. It turns out that over time, books have actually gotten, I think, about 20 to 25% longer. So it's actually
that's the opposite of what we all want. That's not
Indeed.
good.
Indeed. And they think the reason for it is because when people see it's a long book, they just assume that it's valuable. But oftentimes and another critique that a lot of these books have is that they're not just that they're unnecessarily long, but that they're long because there's a lot of redundancy in there, and there's a lot of fluff just to kind of up the page number. And I can totally see that. So I'm a big fan of shorter books, and I'm also a big fan of Audible now.
Yeah, see, the way I put that is I'm a plot guy, Neil. So like all the fancy language, I mean, people appreciate it, but somehow the fancy language became a part of our English education as like, hey, you should write fancy language. And I just think it's sort of the opposite, like just the facts, ma'am, like give me what I need to know. And
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of that too, especially when it comes to writing. It's a lot easier to understand shorter sentences than longer ones. And if you use those fancy words, those tend to up the length of the sentence, because they tend to be long words too. So, and not only that, sometimes you don't even understand what the word means. So it's like, what's that word? This is an SAT word. I gotta look this up. I gotta keep a dictionary beside me while I read this damn book. I ain't with this. I forget this book, man.
Yeah,
I'm not even gonna fish it.
It's one of my mentors is like, hey, keep your articles under 500 words, and it's one of the things I'm trying to figure out. Is like, maybe I'm saying things that I feel like are foundational, but everybody kind of knows them. So, just tell people the things they don't know. Maybe, I don't know, try to figure out exactly, because I feel myself writing long things because I want to explain myself. But I'm trying to create a small group of editors to get some reflection on my writing to kind of help with that brevity part.
Yeah, I hear you. You mentioned getting nervous sometimes, or getting nervous before giving presentations. What do you do to deal with your nerves?
It's a great question. I've started to stand whenever I'm presenting rather than sit. I know this is kind of weird. Obviously, when you generally present, you're standing in front of a group. I think that helps me focus a little bit of my nervous energy. I go over my material. I mean, really, it's about knowing your material. I find a lot of the nervousness, I'm less likely to forget where I'm at if the material I'm giving, I've gone over it, and I feel comfortable with it. That helps a lot. And then knowing, I try to be relaxed. people like to be with someone who's relaxed. So I kind of remind myself before we got on together to sort of, just relax. Like, let's make it a conversation. I don't have to say everything perfectly. And the more I'm myself, then I think that'll, hopefully work itself out.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to be yourself, who the hell else are you going to be, Jim? It's really
Hey, I've been lucky. I think as engineers, we get more of the ability to be ourselves, honestly, like, because we have this more scarce skill and they got to put up with us.
That's a great way to look at it.
It's my theory, Neil.
You know what? I've thought about this before, but oftentimes, I mean, you're absolutely right, Jim, is we could do other people's jobs, but they can't do ours. We can go into sales, we can go into marketing, we can be the CEO, we can do all of that. But can they do the product development? Can they do the design? Hell no.
Yeah. And I tell my business counterparts, like, this is also real. Like, if they have different personalities or they're not as, socially savvy, like, that's the way they get to be, right? Like, every field has its own sort of set of rules, and there's a lot of, I would say, more diverse personalities in engineering. I think for the better now that I think about it. Mm-hmm. Whereas I feel like the personalities might get pushed out of people on the marketing or the business or the executive, the management side. And I think that might be the worst for it.
Huh. I never thought of that. But now I think about it, I think you're right. Engineers can tend to be a quirky bunch. I know I am. And I ain't getting rid of my quirks for nobody.
Yeah, see?
No question. Yeah, Jim.
I don't think business people have that same. I don't think business people have the same choice.
Yeah, I think so. I think you gotta have, especially if there's a certain culture in an organization, you have to adhere to the culture. But maybe with the engineers, they make that exception. It's like, okay, these guys are really smart. They're building the product. Without the product, we ain't got no business. And so we, whatever quirks they got, we'll unless they're completely detrimental to the organization, we'll just put up with them. It's not a problem. Yeah, you know what? I think you're absolutely right. I never thought of it that way. Jim, when it comes to giving presentations, do you have a process for putting your presentations together? And if so, what is it?
I've started the concept of writing out these blog articles, publishing them and getting feedback and incorporating those. So I've started the idea development much sooner. So I like to make the presentation about something that I've written about. For me, the writing is definitely thinking. I want to make the presentations fun, so I'm certainly going to deviate from like the written form. I'm not just going to kind of translate it, but the core ideas are something that I want to pull from something I've written about, and then I often want to pull the core ideas from my clients because it's happening right now, and it's got to be something from multiple clients because I can't really say something really specific about a client. So once I find something that's happening at multiple clients, then I can genericize it. And that prep makes me feel more confident that it's going to resonate with my audience, which makes me feel more, just more mellow and less nervous because I know that I'm talking about something that worries them. I may not get it perfectly right, but they're going to connect with this thing I'm talking about. And so that's one of the ways I prep is the idea material. The other is just lots of material. I mean, when I'm writing, I'm probably throwing away half to 2/3 to 4/5 of what I've written. I'll make a bunch of slides. I don't really think that much on like one particular slide. I'll just kind of go through a presentation and just kind of keep making stuff. I'll go back through it maybe the next day. I think time, being able to go back to it, showing it to somebody else. I have 2 editors that are pretty ruthless. So when I present something, and they're not in my field, right? They're just looking for logical stuff. Like my wife and one of my good friends, they're merciless. They're good on grammar. They're good on flow. And yeah, I mean, whether it's my cooking or my presentations, my wife's pretty honest.
Nice. You know what? When it comes to the editing, it probably is even better if they're from outside your field of expertise, because if they were, they probably would just be paying attention to the content and not necessarily the flow of it. Does this, is this interesting to listen to? Especially, I mean, if you're from outside the field and you're still willing to sit down and listen to what you have to say, even though it's something that you don't know, then that bodes really well. I mean, if they're willing to listen to it, then the people that are within your field, they're likely going to listen to it too. You're expanding your listeners or your audience potential. And I think that's smart of you to do. I've never actually heard someone do that, but now that I hear it, it makes perfect sense. So kudos to you for doing that. So Jim, when it comes to let's just say somebody is watching or listening to this podcast, watching this YouTube channel, they want to get, they're an engineer, they want to get better at presenting because they see the benefit of it. What tips could you offer them for them to improve their presentation skills?
I would encourage you to take the opportunities that are offered, or to make some opportunities to speak more often, and start with smaller groups and work your way up from there. It's really great to start with a group of other engineers. So I would always have like and start with discussion-oriented presentations about things you don't necessarily have to prepare a presentation for, like where you know the material. So really all you're practicing is standing in front of people. So keep the first experiences small, where maybe there's not even a presentation. You know, one of my friends did a great presentation where he took a document, wrote some text on it, and then scrolled the document with other text on it. And each slide was just a line of text, right? Because other engineers aren't going to care about the presentation style. They're going to care about the material. And that way you get to practice. And also just remember that if we engineers don't really speak up, there aren't going to be engineering voices. And when there aren't engineering voices, I just don't think we're going to get like the rich ideas and the balance that we need. So, you know, I think business folks are incredibly capable of doing so many things. And I see some trends in business where engineers are more likely to be seen as a factory. And I just, you know, one of the ways you get to be on the management side of that factory is through speaking, is to be able to relate your ideas to others. And it takes time, you know, and if you get it wrong a couple of times, just know that everybody gets it wrong. But yeah, start small, start with a group of similar folks, and then kind of work your way through to business folks in larger groups. And yeah, lots.
And then when you're done, you can get your wife to edit the presentation.
Yeah, and as you want to get better, you know, cast a wide net, see who responds with their desire to be editing, and then see who really like doesn't care about you but wants to make the material good. And then those ruthless editors are just gold for you. If you can handle the feedback, and whether it's speaking or not, we all need to learn to take feedback. It wasn't my specialty early on. But if you can handle the feedback, well, I mean, just getting feedback, that even if you never present again, if you take a lifelong learning approach, you know, feedback is like one of the main ways you do it when you're outside of college.
No question, Jim. You know what? That's a big pet peeve of mine, man. The people that, you know, you offer them some sort of constructive criticism, they get all defensive. It's like, look, man, ultimately, it's an opinion. You either take it or leave it. Okay? It's like, you're not hurting my feelings if you don't take it. But I'm gonna tell you this one thing. Hey, and you know what? If it works for you, then implement it. And if it doesn't, hey, do what you're gonna do. But you know, don't get all you know, bent out of shape over it. But yeah, that's a big pet peeve of mine. I fully agree with you, Jim. It's really important to be able to take constructive criticism. You'd only get better if you're just at least willing to listen, you know, as opposed to everything is, you know, whatever you do is perfect. And anybody else offers any kind of criticism over it, they're just haters. It's like, nah, man, it's just people just want to help out. I mean, yeah, certainly there's going to be some people that may not have the best of intentions, but I think the majority of the people is just, they're looking to help you out. So yeah, I'm a big fan of getting constructive criticism. This has been really great talking to you, Jim. How can people get in touch with you?
Just go to my website, productdiscoverygroup.com.
Excellent. Well, everybody, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. I offer some public speaking tips for STEM professionals, and it's free. You can get it at teachthegeek.com/tips. Again, that's teachthegeek.com/tips. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Neil. Cheers.